Welcome to Eternal Paradigm. Together we're uncovering the human experience and exploring physical, mental, emotional and spiritual stories with me, your host, Amy Ravel. Welcome to this episode of Eternal Paradigm. I hope you're enjoying your journey to find you. Before we venture into this week's episode, I'm just going to give you a quick roundup of what's been happening. It's been great to see so many of you leaving comments and liking posts on the Eternal Paradigm Facebook page and obviously on Instagram as well. It's absolutely fantastic to hear from you, to see you, to connect with you. I really, really enjoy that. So keep that going. And I also wanted to give you a quick update, really. So last Saturday, we had the live stream for the PodVCon Global Podcast Convention. And I was joined by Mike Bivens, and we talked about comic books, creativity, and make-believe. And Mike spoke about his comic book and his writing, and it was truly an amazing conversation. And just from last week, I have had so many comments and messages from all of you who have managed to catch the live stream and were just absolutely intrigued by the concepts that Mike was talking about. And it was amazing because this was the first time he's actually spoken about the comic concept, all of the writing that he's been doing. And so it was such a great exploration of not only his comic book, but where his creative ideas come from. And obviously, there's a little bit of make-believe there too. But there are still concepts, ideas, and almost parallels that all of us will be able to connect to in some way, shape, or form. And so if you did miss it, head over to the Eternal Paradigm Facebook page because there's a link on there, the live link. I'll also have it in the podcast show notes as well if you want to have a listen to that. What I've also had some feedback to do is to get the video converted over to audio. And so me and podcast editor Maya are currently going to be working that out. So I'm really, really happy to be able to share that with you. And, keep an eye out on Mike's comic book and book updates because it will be on the Facebook page and I'm sure that I'll be connecting with him too. Just so you don't get a shock when you actually go and check out the video. You'll also see that I was balancing a live stream podcast episode, my first one, can I add, with real life mummy duties, especially when I was joined by my 4-year-old daughter. So, it happens to all of us. And, but there you go. I'm going to move on now. So as you know that in March on Saturday evenings, I've been joined by some of the guests who have joined me on the podcast currently and forthcoming guests. And they've been joining me in the clubhouse. And the conversations, I have to say, have been absolutely brilliant. And the participation, people kind of dropping into the rooms, leaving comments, putting their hands up, has been really, really amazing. And that's why I am so excited about this episode because here I get to bring to you this immense energy, and he lives in the form of Krish Patel, who is, among many other things, a podcaster, an author, a sports coach, a supreme storyteller, and his favorite color is orange, like me. So we have that in common, but I won't stop just at the color. But to have stumbled upon a force that Krish is has been truly phenomenal because he shares his learnings in life and living to fulfill what he thought was his lifelong dream of becoming a footballer. Krish talks about many setbacks, darker moments, feelings of not belonging, and yet even still, he's managed to really set up challenges for himself so he could ultimately help others. He values connecting with people to be able to really see the potential. Many of us will connect to what Krish shares, and I absolutely know that you will absolutely be blown away by another amazing person who is just phenomenal. And what I absolutely enjoy about listening to Krish is his wisdom, and wisdom and knowledge actually was one of the topics that we spoke about in our clubhouse room. This episode is effectively another example of how and why we, each of us, is truly amazing with our uniqueness and our own individual stories. And when you meet such powerful, connected people like Krish, who share some deep felt moments of his life story, and he shares them during our conversation in this episode, you can do nothing but realize how you really do and can harness your own potential, but how in unearthing and harnessing your own potential, you really begin to see, feel, connect, and start speaking to another person's potential. And that is a principle, well, one of many principles that Krish himself lives by. And so with that, let me take you forward. Enjoy this episode. Don't forget to check out the Eternal Paradigm Facebook page. Come and connect with me on Instagram. And at the end of the episode, you will also discover how to connect with Krish Patel from the Tales to Inspire podcast.
Right, for the listeners out there, my name is Krish Patel. I am born and raised in Bolton. I'm the founder of an organisation / company / soon-to-be social enterprise called Tales to Inspire. I share people's inspirational stories around the world to encourage people to never give up. I'm 29 years old, and I'm sure we're going to delve into so much. So I guess you'll find out a little bit more about me soon enough.
29, so much has happened.
It has. Age is interesting, isn't it? I don't like to define people by their age. When people say, oh, how old are you? Like 29. Some people say, oh, you're a baby. Or some people say, like, how have you done so much when you're only 29? And it's like, it doesn't matter how old you are. It really doesn't. I speak to so many people, actually. And, oh, you can't teach. They're too old. You could teach someone else. It's like, no, the spirit isn't that. The spirit is to always try and develop.
I'm fascinated. Give us an overview of where you've been and how you got here. So start with the beginning.
Okay, let's take you on a little tale, shall we?
Yes.
A little journey. So my journey really begins from my first memories at the age of 3 or 4 years old. And my first memories on this beautiful planet that we live on was me kicking a football. And it is the most vivid memory of me in the back street in Bolton, kicking a football. And that was it. I knew what I wanted to be from that age was to be a professional football player. However, two things. I'm half Indian and half English. So I was called a Paki, and Pakis don't belong on a football field. They belong on a cricket field. And I remember actually thinking when I was a child, I wished I was white. And it got to that extent where, yeah, it was a struggle. It really was. I questioned my identity. And the other thing was, people call it chubby. I was a really fat kid. And so two things, that I was the wrong race and I was a chubster. So trying to be a professional football player was going to be really difficult. Okay, I want to picture, this is how much I wanted it was. And it takes you to a little bit of a fairy tale land. Do you know those dandelions that when they go across in the summer and you catch them, right, and you make a wish? My wish was to be a professional football player, to play for my home team of Bolton Wanderers, and to be world famous. I don't know how I was going to be world famous playing for Bolton Wanderers, but that was the idea, right? And I remember at 9 years old in class at primary school, the teacher asked the whole class, what is it that you want to be when you're older? It can be anything, any dream you want. She went around the whole entire class. Oh, there was nurses, doctors, pilots, astronauts, all sorts. And I said, I want to be a professional footballer. And she said, oh, that's nice, Krish, but maybe it's good to have a plan B. So like that kind of either subtlety or disbelief in my own potential was there for all to see. And at the age of 18, I became a professional football player. I played for a team called Bury, and I never played against another Asian football player in my entire professional career, or even going up to that in the youth ranks, playing against other professional football teams as a child. I never played against another person who looked like me. And I have to caveat all of this. Girls, cars, money, fashion is all I cared about. Like professional footballer, that's what I wanted to be. That's how I lived my life. And that's what I saw a professional footballer as. So I really tried to fit me into that, which was what made me realize that I've always been trying to fit myself into something. And at 18, I got to play against some of the best professional footballers in the world. My dreams, my childhood dreams. Played against Man United, Man City, Paul Scholes, Pogba, Danny Welbeck. Like, these are players that I grew up just like thinking, wow, they just played for England, or they played in World Cups, won Champions Leagues, and I'm playing against them. And I was like, whoa, this is incredible. But on the other side of that it wasn't all I thought it would be. I was injured most of the year, and the guys did great. They got promoted to the league above, but I didn't feel part of that team. I was always injured. I was always in the physio. I didn't contribute. So I felt like the one left out. I was living on my mum and dad's sofa. I was living on my mum and dad's, but most of the day I was spending on their crappy yellow sofa. And I was I was struggling. I started to really have these emotions where I started to question everything. I had these real deep, dark insecurities and lack of confidence, lack of conviction. Who am I? How can I share this with anyone? Who can I share this with? I couldn't do it in the football environment. You can't show weakness. Couldn't do it at home. We'd never talk about that kind of stuff. My friends, we don't talk about that stuff. It's all about bravado and how great we are, right? So who could I share this with? And I didn't know who I could share it with. It got to the point where I'd be going to the physio in the morning for football, and by 12 o'clock I'd be back home, and I'd head off to the casino for 2 or 3 hours and play poker every day, Monday to Friday. Not big money, just wasting time. And it was me by myself with probably another 3 or 4, 5 or 6 people at the poker table, 6 or 7 quid. There's no big money going down, but it was just really wasting time. To the extent that I used to get in my car and drive with no destination, and I would do this repetitively. And that's how my life was. I didn't know where I was heading. I was in the car, floating about.
What questions were you asking yourself, Krish?
Where was my foundation? Who was Krish? Where was I heading? Where was my path? Where did I belong? And I was lost. Now I can look back and say, yeah, I was severely depressed. I was really depressed. I don't like to use the word depression, mental health, and all that kind of stuff just turns me off as a guy. But it came out of me as frustration, lost, who, questions, massive questions I was asking myself. Anger, and then I got released. 19 years old, I got told I was going to be a professional football player. They're going to support me. They trust me. They're there for me. And then gone, released. The only player that season to get released. Everyone else got kept on. They got promoted. And I was the one to be left out. And it was hard. It was seriously hard. I remember crying my eyes out on the last time we was with all the guys. We went away to Marbella for a celebration for the promotion party. I came back on that plane, and I knew that I would never see these boys again. And I didn't know where my life was heading. And I knew that, and I started crying, and the club doctor took me to the side and just let me cry on his shoulder. No one saw it. Thankfully, he saw it before anyone else. And that was it. I remember looking at my diary actually recently, and the questions I was asking myself is, I was so sad, but I was asking myself, where's my life heading? What am I doing? I was asking myself, do I want to play football? My identity was football. And 20 years old, I got an offer to play in California. And that's where things got spicy. I think that's where the real deal got going,
Things get
the offer,
spicier.
It really did. California, the deal went like this. Full ride scholarship. Now, I dropped out of school when I was 16, did my GCSEs, and I stopped. So full ride scholarship to get my education. Going to university in California, close to the beach, living in a mansion, great facilities. And I don't even think I closed the door behind me. I was like, Mum, Dad, cheerio. I'm off to California. This picture of American Pie or these typical amazing times, and I am off. I'm swimming shorts, snorkel, I'm booked in, flip-flops, I'm off.
What happened when you turned up in California?
I turned up in California to the shock of my life. And I remember even the first day, I knew something was wrong. And it was, I was living in a 3-bedroom house with 13 other guys. My scholarship was completely lied to. I didn't have a scholarship. I was 12 hours from the beach, and it was minus 20 degrees in the winter, freezing cold. We had 55 players for a 23-man team. People from all over the world had traveled to get there. The facilities were non-existent. We were playing football on a baseball field. And Susanville, California, you can check this out, is home to about 15,000 people. And out of those 15,000 people, there are 3 prisons. One of those prisons is a maximum security prison, high desert prison, where all the murderers and rapists from the whole of California are shipped to. So 4,500 people. Another 4,000 people in a medium security prison. And then another 500 to 1,000 people in this juvenile delinquency prison, this kids prison. So about 9,000 people out of this 15,000 in the population were in one of these prisons. And I was furious, absolutely furious. I was playing against Manchester United a year ago. Now I'm in Susanville, California, living this horrendous life. What am I doing in my life? There was one guy, though, one person in the team who was always happy. Always, bro, never give up. Always happy, always positive. And I hated that guy. I couldn't stand him. Gabby was called. He was from Brazil. And he had it worse than me. He was living in a basement, and he wasn't even in the starting team, right? And I just couldn't stand him, honestly. And one day I said to Gabby, Gabby, I'm going back to Bolton. Screw this crap. I've had enough. And he said a few things, and he said to me that, Krish, if you keep running away from your obstacles, you're never going to overcome anything in your life. And that was like a big ton of bricks that really needed to be put down. It was like, boom, there's your reality, Krish. You ran away from your struggles in Bolton. You're running away from your struggles again in California. When are you going to face up to face the reality of the situation? And he saw the potential in me when I didn't. One person stood up for me to change my life completely. One person. And that moment I'm eternally grateful for it. And Gabby's one of my best mates now. And he's in Brazil, but it completely changed my life. I went from that moment to changing from girls, cars, money to realizing that wasn't true happiness. What Gabby did for me, I started to do for others.
What was your next move after this realization?
I moved after 2 years. I moved to Montgomery, Alabama, which like people like Montgomery, Alabama, like, what are you doing, you muppet? Like, why are you going there? Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King, the first black rights, first black vote in America, the civil rights movement. Crazy. So much of like history, terrible, dark history of the US is in Montgomery, Alabama. But I saw it as it's a capital city in Alabama. It's the capital of Alabama. On a map, it looks like it's close to Atlanta. It looks like it's bloody miles away, but it looks like it's close to New Orleans, Orlando, all these places. But I thought, you know what? I've overcome Susanville. I can go anywhere. And I turned up in Montgomery, and to be honest, it was amazing. I saw the true reality of the situation. Yes, there was a massive racial divide. I saw poverty that you would not know existed in the USA. I saw so much, but also the facilities I had, the scholarship I had, everything I had was unbelievable. But it had all been about me. It had all been about Krish's journey, Krish's football, Krish's degree. And I wanted to do something bigger.
What happened next? What was the light bulb moment for you?
2016, I graduated with a degree in business. And I realized that if I can Facebook message someone across the world, why can't I help someone across the world? And so my idea was, I'm going to run 4 marathons in 4 days from the northwest of England to the northeast, coast to coast. And I would call it the Road to Uganda campaign. People would donate money and I would go to Africa and build something sustainable. So people were like, whoa, this guy, especially people from England. I went to America in 2012 as this guy who cared about all this superficial crap. And then in 2016, I'm doing this stuff. And I'm like, who's this guy? What's he like? I don't get it. What's he doing?
That's fascinating. The juxtaposition of two polars of the whole. Yes, you're chasing money. Yes, this is great. Yes, fame, success. But when you want to help others, talk a little bit more about that dynamic. What was that like?
It's actually quite fun. Because it showed when I kept going, whenever, so for example, at Christmas, I'd go back home to England or whatever, and I would notice that even my parents, people didn't know me. And I loved it because the adventure that Krish had been on had started for me to realize who I truly am. And I'd started to tap into me. And I'd never done that in my entire life. To be honest, I didn't know it at the time, but now I realized that I wasn't living my life. And when I came back, I was living my life. And I think that's where these people thought they knew me, and fair play. But I went from developing my life, say, at 5 miles per hour before I went to the US, to developing my life at 155 miles per hour. And if you develop your life as 155 miles per hour, then when you come back, of course, people are going to think, oh, like, this is different. This is strange. I don't get it. I used to be this angry, frustrated guy who used to take out his anger on everyone, right? And I don't get me wrong, I still got my natural tendencies, but one of the things that people say to me is that they don't believe, like, how am I angry? Like, what? Never seen that. Or lazy. I'm a lazy guy. Like, that's my natural tendency. I just want to sit on the sofa and do nothing, right? But like, Krish does 15-hour days every day at the moment. You know, Krish is the guy who ran 4 marathons. Yeah, Krish is the guy who went and volunteered in Uganda and built a school. You know what I mean? Like, so there's this paradox to, yes, I've got this internal. There's a really good Daisaku Ikeda. He's an amazing author. He's a leader of a lay Buddhist organization that I practice Nichiren Buddhism with. And he says this amazing thing where he says, you can't train, your personality is like a river. Now, the banks of the river will always stay the same. They don't move, but the water in it is completely you. And you control the water. Now, if the water can be dirty and there can be nothing in it, that can be your personality. However, you can change what your natural personality traits are, which is the banks of the river, so that water's beautiful and fresh and that there's life teeming all over it. So my natural personality traits, yes, I understand that I can't change certain things. And I feel like sometimes we're trying to change the things we can't change. But actually, the water the internal, the anger, the laziness, the frustration, the greed, the ego, I can transform them for the better. And when I use them to something powerful, then I'm unstoppable. And that's something that I've really realized, that stop changing the banks of the river, Krish, just change the water. And it was huge. It was huge. So yeah, so that got me to just about to go to Uganda, really. And from there, yeah.
Just go back to the marathons. Tell us how many marathons you did, in how many days, and what happened once you completed them. And then add in what other madness you decided to bring to the table, because I love this.
Okay, yeah. So with the marathons, it was kind of weird. People would say to me, you're absolutely loopy. You've never run a marathon in your life. You're running 4 in 4 days. I trained in Montgomery, Alabama, where the temperature, it was a boiling hot, like 4. It was so hot. And I remember I was training like 3 or 4 in the morning to try and have some kind, but it was still like 25 degrees. So, and I was doing the marathons in winter, January the 2nd to January the 7th or whatever it was. And it was flat. Montgomery is flat. And I was going from the northwest of England to the northeast. It's hilly. So people were like, you're crazy. And they were also like, you're going to Africa? I was like, yeah. It's like, why? I was like, don't really know. I just know I want to go to Africa and I really want to make a difference. You hear about all these stories where people are like, you can't change Africa. You can't do anything. It's so corrupt. There's so much injustice. And I wanted to see it for myself. And then the other thing that they would say is, where's the money going, Krish? Where's the money going we're donating? And my answer was, something sustainable. And they would be like, what the hell does that mean? Like, what does that mean? Something sustainable. Like, usually people have a direct, right, you're giving me money, it's going to something. Mine was, you're giving me money, I've never been to Africa before, so how do I know what it's going to? It's going to something sustainable. Yeah, so I did the 4 marathons in 4 days, and don't get me wrong, it kicked my butt. I don't like running unless there's a ball involved. And if I'm going to be totally honest, it was difficult. It was so difficult. And yeah, you can train for something, but until you actually do it, I wouldn't say I'm a long distance runner whatsoever. I've never done anything as long since. And that was 2017, January 2017.
Yeah.
So yeah, so then I think 5 days later, I headed out to Uganda and started volunteering. So literally as soon as I think I finished on like a Wednesday or a Thursday or something, and I think that following Monday or that Tuesday I was off out to Africa to go and volunteer. And I only had 3 weeks because I had to be back in the US because of my visa. So I had 3 weeks to volunteer. I had 3 weeks to find where the money would go to build sustainability. I had 3 weeks to find someone to trust to give the money to, which was another thing people said I was a nut job at, was you're going to give a Ugandan guy who's never had money, £8,000, and you expect them to build the thing you want them to build? And all these questions, and one part of me, that little goblin or whatever you want to call it on my shoulder would say, who are you to do this? What makes you think you're worthy of this? Like, surely he's going to just take all your money. And then the other part of me, the greater self, is do the thing that Gabby did for you. Gabby saw the potential in me. Why can't I see the potential in someone else? And that was I literally went with that. The lesser self and the greater self. I went with the greater self, but most people with the lesser self. Most people with the self-doubt. And it's something that I find really interesting about the USA and the UK is if I have an idea in the US, 100 people will give me a reason why I can achieve that idea. If I have an idea in the UK, 100 people will give me that reason why I can't achieve that idea. And it's that self-doubt that we have of, we don't believe we can do this. But that's your own self-doubt. That's you. Because you've not achieved your life. Because you've not tapped into your inner potential. Because you've accepted what others have said. You've been the sheep and not the lion. And I refuse to be the sheep. Refuse it. Because I know how unhappy it is when I try and be one. You know?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so that's where really, and I'm saying this, I was 24 years old at the time, right? Mm-hmm. 24, decided all of this. I didn't know anyone my age or anything doing that. And 25, I headed out to Africa, and that was just the best thing I ever did, really.
It was just a mess, but the best thing you ever did.
It was a mess, like, and my life has been. Some people need organization and some people need a plan to get to where they need, you know?
Mm-hmm. What does Krish need?
I need a determination. That's it.
Determination is there in bags.
And that's all I need. I cannot plan. If I plan, I get overwhelmed. For me, there's that, what is it? Is my goal a push goal? Do I need a push goal that really makes me uncomfortable? So is my uncomfortable my comfort? Or do I need a comfort goal? And is my comfort goal something that I know that I'm good and I can aim for that? Now, both are beautiful people. I cannot be the comfort guy. because the comfort guy is me regressing. The comfort guy doesn't push me, doesn't test me, doesn't push me out of my boundaries. Some people need that and they get overwhelmed when they try and get out of their comfort zone too much. They put themselves a massive goal. I would rather have a big goal and fall short than a small goal and hit it.
Interesting, because it's what you say, right? Most people will kind of aim for the big goal and then fall short and then beat themselves up forever for just not achieving that.
But I don't think I've achieved, and this is something interesting. I've done all this stuff and people will say, Krish, you must be so proud of yourself. Well, to be honest, I don't really know what that feels like because I've never actually hit my goals. Because actually, there's so much more to do. And I don't think it's this thing of, oh, you're not enjoying the moment. It's the fact that I'm not here to stop. Life is huge. I'm going to fit 1,000 years in my lifetime. Simple. Like, that is how I'm going to do it. I know I'm not going to live forever. And you know what? More than likely, I ain't going to live past the age of 50. Screw it. Whatever. I'm going to live so much and I'm going to put myself in situations that are going to be life-threatening, whatever. That's the way I'm going to live my life. And I know that. But the fact is, in that 50 years or 60 years or 70 years or whatever it is, I'm going to have lived 1,000 years within that. I'm going to have done 1,000, like, you know what I mean? I'm going to develop so much and it impacted so many people's lives. That's the legacy I really want to have. And and I think something's really interesting that we don't talk about death. Even with my family, I remember speaking to my mum about it and I spoke to my sister once about it, and it's don't talk like that. Hey, we're 4 facts of life. We'll be born, we're going to grow old, we're going to get sick, and we're going to die. We all know we'd be born. We all know that, yes, we're going to get sick. We all know we're going to get old, but we don't really accept that. And then we all know we're going to die, and we do not talk about that. That is the thing that no one talks about. Mm-hmm. And it's actually the thing that I know, you know what? It's going to happen. I've been in some risky situations already. And actually, when I got in those situations, I never felt more alive. And I don't mean that by saying go and put yourself in dangerous situations. What I mean by that is it's proved to me that there is nothing to fear. Like, there's just nothing to fear. Like, why do we live our lives in this fear? Like, we trap ourselves with mortgages and houses and bills and our family, and we make this excuse that we're a victim. But actually, we are the ones to take this life on. We have chosen, this is our life. Like, there's no one else. You're the one. And there's an amazing Buddhist concept called Eshofuni, which means the oneness of self and environment. So it means that when you change, your environment changes, not the other way around.
Yeah.
We try and change our environment all the time. I see it all the time in this society that we live. We're always trying to change our environment, but we forget to change ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
If we change ourselves, our environment will automatically change. So our environment is a reflection of the within. And that's so powerful. And when I learned that, at first I questioned it and I was like, no. And
ooh, what were you thinking? What was your initial question? What were you questioning about that?
Well, the question I had, so Gabby, when I started practicing, so I practiced Nichiren Buddhism. And in 2012, 2013, Gabriel also introduced me to Nichiren Buddhism. My initial thought was, well, I didn't think it. I told him straight, was I don't believe in Buddha. I don't believe in your God. I don't believe in any of this religious crap, right? From a half Indian background, half English background, Christian background, Hindu background, and religion had just been like, you know what? I never connected with it. It's ancient. It's got nothing to do with me. It's way back in the time. It's caused more deaths than you can ever imagine. It's all about the money, corruption. It's all about this crap, and I don't want to get myself into that realm. You know, it's all bollocks basically. And one day, Gabby said, "Come to a Buddhist meeting," and I think it must have been like the 10th time I told him no. And then he said, "Free food." And I was a student at the time, and it's quite funny. He's Brazilian. He said Brazilian food, and I was like, "Oh, I don't really know what Brazilian food is." And I was hungry, and I thought, well, I was like, "I'll come to your Buddhist meeting." And got to the Buddhist meeting, and they were all chanting this "Nam Myoho Renge Kyo" kind of words, and they're all facing this piece of paper, and I was like, what the bloody hell is going on? Like, what? Like, are they? It's like a cult. They're freaks. Like, what are they doing? And and the food was at the end, and I was like, you rascal! Like, so I didn't want to leave to offend him, so I just sat, like looking around and twiddling my thumbs, and then after they stopped chanting, they had this dialogue, and that was precious. The dialogue was about life, the problems in life, the things we go through, but also about the solutions. That I didn't feel alone. All these things that I had these emotions for, I could then put a name to it and I could communicate with others. And wow, and it was so real, but also so easy to deal with. And their solutions, every question I had, it was usually when I went to a religious thing, I'd ask a question, they'd be like, put your hand down. Here they were like, please put your hand up. Ask more questions. And the more questions I asked, the even greater answers I had. And it all made sense. So then I had to test it. And one of the questions was the Eshofuni. And as soon as they talked about Eshofuni, I said, rubbish. I said, because the coach who brought me here is a terrible person and I hate him. And he's brought 55 other players to California. He's lied to us all. He's taken advantage. And Gabriel said, chant for his happiness. And I said, screw his happiness. Why would I want him to be happy? He's the guy who's done this to me. And he said, chant for his happiness, because if he was truly happy, he wouldn't do this. And I was still in denial, and I was like, no, I'm not going to chant for his happiness. I'm not going to chant for his happiness. And then I started to chant for his happiness, and I realized that within me, I started to respect him, and I started to respect the things that coach possibly went through. And then I remember one day the coach opened up to me, and he just said to me, he said, look, I've been through all this stuff, and relationships and stepson and all this kind of stuff. And it was, I don't know why he came to me, and possibly it's because I was chanting. My environment reflected my internal. And I can't say I love the guy, but I can say that I respected him by when I left. And yeah, Eshofuni, man. Yeah, I think it's an incredible concept, and it shows to self-mastery. The Arnold Toynbee, an amazing historian from Britain, he talks about what is the number one fundamental thing for humanity in the future to succeed. And he said, self-mastery. We can master ourselves based on the respect of life. We can transform any situation.
What does true self-mastery take? What is that journey?
True self-mastery is sitting in front of the mirror or looking at yourself and saying that I will never give up, saying that I am not the victim and I will break through this. No matter what the situation, no matter what, whether it's someone's died in your family, and I can give an experience to this where, okay, all right, I've not talked about this, but I'll talk about it. So I used to go to these Buddhist meetings in Susanville, and there was a lady who used to sit at the back of these Buddhist meetings, and she never spoke. And she would sit at the back of these Buddhist meetings, and she would sit, and we'd have dialogue, we'd chant, and we'd have food, and she always came. And I could wonder, why does she keep coming to these meetings? Like, she sits at the back, doesn't do anything. And one day, we was having this conversation about death, and about one of the questions was, how can you value death? I think it was about, you've lived your life to the fullest. If you die, no matter what, then at least you fulfilled like your purpose, kind of thing. No matter what, everyone's here for a purpose. And someone goes like, well, what about when a 6-month-old baby dies? What's that purpose, and how does it affect the parents? And she came from the back of the room, and she moved her chair forwards, and she said, I'd like to share something. And we were all like astonished, like, whoa, like, she's talked, she has a voice. And she shared this story. Well, not a story, her life. That her husband and her young son were in a car crash and both died. She didn't have any other children, and I think it was about a year before that. And she'd been coming to these Buddhist meetings ever since. And her family and her husband's family had never seen eye to eye. They hated each other, right? And she said she was heartbroken, of course, and she was crying while she was telling us this. And then she said that the value, even if it's the smallest thing, that yes, they died, but something came of it. And the thing that came of it that she could see in that moment was it brought both families together, that they were so united and connected, and they cared for each other, and they were there for each other. And she just lost her whole world. And it was something that she was becoming the self. She was mastering herself. She wasn't the victim. She had every reason to be the prisoner, to be the victim, to be the one to say, you know what, like they dealt me a bad set of cards, you know, but she didn't. Like, and don't get me wrong, she suffered, like 100%. We're human, like we suffer. But that moment there made me realize that there is nothing that we cannot not take responsibility for. I don't mean blaming ourselves, but I mean just saying, what can I do? What can I do from this moment forwards? Not what have they done to me? What can I do for me?
So what and where was your first experience of homelessness, if you can share that?
My first experience of homelessness wasn't in the UK. It was in Uganda. When I was in Uganda, I volunteered with children who were disabled, children who were in orphanages, women's empowerment where they'd been abused, like I said, homeless children. I was coaching football and I was in schools. And children were on the streets, right? And they were smiling, but they were on the streets. And they were addicted to drugs. They were addicted to mafuta, which is aeroplane fuel, basically. And one of the reasons is it stops you from feeling hungry. And these kids, some of them are as young as 4 years old on the streets of Uganda. And it's crazy. And I didn't really know what I was doing, if I'm going to be totally honest. But once I'd been there and I'd helped build the schoolhouse that educates 150 children per term in Uganda, I came back and to the US. I was there for a year, but I started to see more injustices. My eyes had been awakened. My life had been awakened to the reality of life, and I couldn't put it back to sleep. I started to see these things that other people were just walking past. Homelessness. I'd see injustices within restaurants, people abusing waitresses and waiters. I'd see all sorts of just, you wouldn't talk to your worst enemy like that, but you're talking to someone you've never met who's just because they're serving you, you would do that. And yeah, and I got back to Manchester in 2018. I went to the Uganda to finish off this, to open the school building, celebrate, amazing, volunteer again. I took my dad. I was like, because I don't know, I just wanted him to see what I'd done. It was me. I'd done this. And we did that. And I went to go back to the US. My job was there. My car was there. My last 6 years of my life was there. And I couldn't get in the country. My visa got rejected. And I found myself in 2018 back on my mum and dad's crappy yellow sofa, feeling all the emotions I had in 2012. I was down. I was lost. Why me? I had that victim mentality. I was surely not, I was waking up questioning life, questioning whether I'd done the right things. I applied for over 250 jobs. I couldn't even get a job. And it was so tough. It was so tough. And on the outside, Krish is this happy-go-lucky ball of energy, incredible guy, right? And everyone, they'll say, oh, I wish we could be like you or whatever. On the inside, and even to today, I have my dark days, I really do. And it gets really bleak. And that's why I know the world's, when my mum says, your head's in the clouds, you think this world's a happy place. I know it's not a happy place because it's not happy in my house sometimes, I know. And when it gets dark, it gets really dark. And I couldn't get a job. Started working at Starbucks, serving people coffee. And I went into Manchester and I saw all these homeless people everywhere. They were everywhere. And anyone who lives in Manchester or the Northwest, and you go into the city centre, and maybe not now with COVID and stuff, but when in 2018 and I looked around, there was homeless people everywhere. And my questions I asked were, what's wrong with them? Why are there so many drug addicts, alcoholics? And what's the issue? But I'm curious, right? I'm a very curious person. And I have a friend, Jen Bobbs, who has an outreach group called Through Power. And I said, hey, Bobbs, any chance if I can come on this outreach group with you and check out what all this homelessness stuff is? I wanted to confirm that I was right, that it was a problem with homeless people. And I went out on that first homeless outreach and I realized these homeless people were people. I'd mixed it up. Homeless person. I'd had homeless before person, but actually I should have had person who was homeless and drug addicts, alcoholic, relationship struggles. And yeah, so what? Why am I judging what they are? I'm not seeing their potential. I'm not seeing what they've been through. I've not lived their experience. Who am I to judge that? And I was fascinated. I was fascinated by them. This world that I'd never delved into, and they lived on my doorstep. So I now run that homeless outreach group. We're out every single week in Manchester. It's incredible. Through Power, sometimes I've been out at 7 a.m. in the morning. On Wednesdays, we go out. On the other week, we'll go out at 7:30 at night. And I've been abused for helpless homeless people. So people will tell me, can't teach an old dog new tricks. Or if they're not willing to help themselves, why should we help them? People have told me they're the vermin of our society. I've had arguments in the streets of people coming out of office blocks. I've seen people coming out of office blocks, spitting on them, kicking them. I've seen homeless people abused physically, verbally. And I realized there was a gap between the homeless person and the society that walks past them. And it's something that I get it, but we didn't have empathy. There was no empathy. And 2019, January, I think, someone said to me, Krish, just stop wasting your time doing all this goody stuff and charity goody stuff and get a proper job, earn as much money as you can and be happy and live a comfortable life. And I just loved that fact because it just literally sparked a fire inside of me. It was like, watch this, watch what I do. That's the biggest turn off for me. Earn as much money as you can, live a comfortable life. Boom. Flat as a pancake. I don't care about that crap. Watch what happens. And yeah, so I decided that I would swim every lake in the Lake District, all 53 miles. I'd never swam outside before. I would call it the Swim for Shelter campaign. And the tagline was helping homeless people go from the streets and back to their feet. And it was incredible, right? I mean, once again, self-doubt. Who am I? And it gets real. Who am I to swim in these lakes? And then you get in a lake and you're like, oh crap, it's a lake. What am I what am I doing? But I'd been swimming in a pool, and determination, right? And physically, it kicked my butt. Mentally, and it got me as well. My granddad died the day before I swam Crummock Water, in which I was swimming about 5 miles on that day. And I remember saying to Grandma, Grandma, I'm not going to swim it. Granddad's just passed away. And saying to my mum, yeah, I'm not going to do it. And they both said, like, your granddad would have wanted you to swim, And I remember thinking, my reason why, what's my reason behind any of this? And it was so powerful that, yeah, I swam it, goggles full of tears. And it was huge, just huge. I remember swimming Lake Ullswater, and 2 weeks before, I found out one of my good friends from the US, Bassi, passed away. He had a brain tumor. He was 24 years old at the time and passed away. And I'd never been to Iceland, and I was supposed to meet him at the end of my swim in December, and I never got to see him again. So guess what? Even though I had a 7.7 mile swim in 6 days' time, I got on a plane. I went to Iceland. I got 4, 5, 6 planes. I spent a crap ton of money that I didn't have. I spent a day and a half in Iceland for Bassi. Had a most incredible time, and then did the whole journey, 16, 17 hours. I was going backwards to come forwards to get back to the UK. And yeah, I remember just feeling so connected to Bassi, but also to the world. Every single person I've ever met, I feel so connected to. And it's sad, right? I know people around the world now. I have friends that are around the world that I will never see all together at once again, ever. It will never happen.
I get that.
But I feel so connected. And part of me is so sad because I would love to have them all there and just spend those moments. But part of me is so happy that actually in a world that we need to see everything to believe it, that I know at this moment in time right now, I have true friends everywhere who are just incredible. And maybe like one of the reasons for my life is friendship. It's precious, and I truly think it's so important. I've never talked about Bassi before, and that experience, I really kept it to myself. So thank you for giving me this space to really share that.
I'm so glad you felt able to share that, and I'm really sorry about your loss.
And once it comes to death, right? And I knew Bassi lived his life to the full, right? And I knew that, like, that's incredible. And I still have one of his voice messages abusing me, right? As you do, like, oh, are you like, what are you up to? And have you changed your ways yet? And are you actually, all this kind of stuff, right? That we would have this banter with, and I still got it on my phone, and it's just incredible. But death isn't the end of life. If you actually look at it from a scientific point of view, the energy never stops. Energy in this universe does not stop. So
it doesn't. You're right.
So why do we think we're made up of the same particles in this universe? We have to be part of this universe. But for some reason, we think we stop. Like, just because we can't consciously think it, like, actually, we are all energy built out of cells that vibrate at a frequency. We are part of this universe, and we know energy never stops. So just because they're not there, guess what? They're still part of this universe. There's nowhere else you can go. Like, it's beautiful. And yeah, I got digressed, but basically I finished in September the 8th. I swam Lake Windermere, 2019. I was 28 years old at the time. No, 27 years old at the time, and 11.7 miles, 9.5 hour swim. And I get messages from all over the world. Incredible, you're fantastic. I helped 36 homeless people go from the streets into an employment program in Manchester with an incredible charity called the Booth Centre. And yeah, part of me did feel good, but part of me felt there's a common theme that once I do my challenges, I always feel so depressed afterwards. And part of me felt like all I wanted to do was help people. Fact, truth, full stop. That's it. Why was it so hard? Like, I was working, I got a job as a 9 till 5, working behind a computer desk, and I was lost. I felt like a robot with blood, and I just couldn't move forwards. And if I'd said to people that I want to just earn as much money as possible, it would have been so much easier than saying I just want to help as many people as possible. And it wouldn't have raised as many eyebrows. And so weird, and so strange. And it's as if like this thing, I was seeking something. I was seeking, and I was frustrated. And October of 2019, I went out on a homeless outreach, like our usual homeless outreach in Manchester. I came across a guy, a homeless person, who a light bulb moment changed my life forever once again. And he said to me, Krish, stories are the pages that make up this book we call life. And that, if you just think about that, stories are the pages that make up this book we call life. And usually that would go straight over my head. I'd be like, what's this? What's he chatting on about, this lad? And we'd walk on, But it was huge, absolutely huge. It made me realize my light bulb moment was everyone has a story. The question is, how can we use those stories to encourage people to never give up? And in October of 2019, that was it. I knew. I created talestoinspire.com, and I got a friend who was homeless, Danny, and he was homeless for 5 years, and he overcame it, and I interviewed him. I wrote his tale. I gave it to my mum. My mum edited it. She gave it me back, and I put it on the website, and I put a few helplines at the bottom, and I thought, let's do it. Let's see what happens. And within one day, a young lady who was going to commit suicide read Danny's story. She felt encouraged, and she went and got help via one of the helplines. And sometimes there's just no words. In a lot of ancient traditions, there's silence is the only word that's appropriate. And in that moment, you can't describe that emotion, And and within 3 days, Danny's story had been read in 15 countries around the world. And I was like, maybe this has something, maybe power of a story does, maybe there is something about this. And every week since 2019, that November the 3rd, 2019, we've released a tale from people of all walks of life from all over the world to show people that there's nothing they can't overcome, And I'm not here to judge what the challenge is. I'm not here that the one thing is the transformation. You've been through something and overcome it. Like, my molehill could be your mountain. So I'm not here to judge what the molehill or the mountain is. I'm here to judge, you know what? Did you break through your challenge? That's the thing. And it's not to show people that, look, oh, John did it, so why can't you? No, that's not it. It's John did it. Let's ignite the spark, the potential that exists within you to get your engine running in your own unique, authentic way. And it's been incredible. And in January of 2020, I quit my job, my 9 to 5 job. And I was like, screw this. I'm going to go full-time Tales to Inspire. And people were like, how are you going to earn any money? And I was like, I have no idea. And I was like, I've got to connect to my purpose, and I've got to do this. And I set up another company, coaching sports, and I knocked on every school door in Bolton, and I was like, you need a sports coach? And they were like, no. And I knocked on one of them, and they said, we'll give you an hour a week, And I was like, I'll take your hour a week. And now I have a company that we do 2 days a week at that school, but we also go to different schools in the area coaching sports. And that gets me my money to where I am today. In October of 2020, we released the Tales to Inspire podcast, because I realized that I was interviewing these people, then I was writing it down, and it was great. But the emotion, sometimes I was crying, I was laughing, I was up, I was down, I was out sometimes, but that journey was something that I wanted people to come on along with me, And October, I got people involved in that. And in December of 2020, I became an author of the Tales to Inspire book. I launched. I realized during the lockdowns and stuff, I was like, how can I make a tangible difference? The question I asked myself is, how can I make a bigger impact in my world today? I kept asking myself that question. And I was like, what can I do? What can I do? And I realized that I've got all these tales on the blog, so the interviews, and why not write them up? 23 tales to show you that there's nothing that you can't overcome, to ignite that spark that exists within you, And basically we released that, and we got onto BBC and ITV, and then schools got in touch. Now we have an education package that goes into schools, which is incredible. We've got so much coming on, like so many exciting things. There's so much. I want to change the world. Simple. By small differences, starting with me, my microcosm to my macrocosm. But I know that people are suffering. So if I know people are suffering, what can I do for those people? And just because someone lives in Africa, just because someone lives a life that I've never lived, there's one big common denominator. They're human. Simple. Simple as that. You can figure out as many differences as you want, but there's one bloody big Golden Gate Bridge that connects us, and it is that we are human. And that's one of the things that literally is my life's mission, or one of them is, I should be able to connect to anyone. Why not? It's me to be able to connect to the other person. That's my role. There's no excuses. If they don't speak the same language, so be it. Like, I don't have to love the person, but can I find the bridges? Yes, you can. How do you find the bridges? Go about doing it, and that's kind of my role in this. Not my role. There's many roles, but it's something I think that, what? Oh no, I'm an introvert, or I'm a this, or I'm a that. Well, guess what? Introverts need a tribe. Like, doesn't mean just because you're an introvert, you have to live your life alone. Humans are not here to live this life alone. We have to live in a tribe. We have to have a community. So Tales to Inspire is that community, is a community.
You've asked yourself so many questions, right? So if you could leave a question out there for listeners to ponder over, what question would that be?
The question is, how can I live the most fulfilled life that I want to live? That's the question, like fulfillment. Like, how can I live the most fulfilled life that I want to live? That's probably the one most fundamental question, and that will change. But yeah.
Where can listeners find out more about Tales to Inspire?
If people do want to get in touch with me or Tales to Inspire, then all they need to do is go to the website, www.talestoinspire.com. Otherwise, they can go on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. We're at Tales to Inspire. That's 2 as in T-O, not the number 2. And you're more than welcome if you have an inspirational story or know someone that you think does, then get in touch. Also, if you work in a corporate office, then get in touch because we have amazing workshops and sessions planned exactly for you to show you that there's nothing that you can't overcome and bring people's own authenticity and uniqueness to their workplace. We also have our educational package. So if you work in a school, then guess what? We have an inspirational educational package for your children. So there's lots that we really have, and please feel free to get in touch. We are building this community to show people that there's nothing they can't overcome. I'm really determined to make this movement to really ignite that spark that exists within.
I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Eternal Paradigm. Join me next time.